Nathan Gorton.
Hey, how we doing?
Good. Thank you so much for being here on our first podcast. It's the Around the Block, a Tap Car podcast. You've not seen the logo yet.
I have not.
I'm going to show you. This is the live reaction.
All right, let's see it.
What do you think?
Okay, I like it.
It's very unique looking, isn't it?
It is.
All right, but by the time everyone sees it, it'll look a little different than what you're looking at.
We're going to get rid of a tree.
A couple trees.
Couple of trees.
Which, speaking of trees,
yeah.
How much do the realtors get involved with tree issues?
That's a great lead-off question, Jasmine.
I wasn't planning that, but since we talked about it.
I mean, there's some tree issues that impact development. And so those are very local issues typically. So I think that you would see us get involved in some of like the tree retention ordinances, things like that. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bread and butter issue for the realtor organization.
But it comes up sometimes.
It does, yeah.
All right.
It does.
Well, we didn't ask you here to talk about trees specifically, but since we did show you the logo first before anyone else, I thought that would be, kind of a good example of some of the things that we talk about. So you are fresh into your position at Washington Realtors. You're almost at a year, and you were over a decade as the government affairs director for Washington State Realtors.
Correct, yeah.
And now give us your exact title and what it is that you do.
Sure. I'm the chief executive officer at Washington Realtors, which means that I oversee the entire operation, right? From government affairs department to our education department, to our communications department. I report directly to the Washington Realtors president, Jeff Smart. Mm-hmm. And then I staff the executive committee. And it's been a lot of fun. It's way different than being a government affairs director. That's for sure. But I'm enjoying it.
Well, I must say, I've enjoyed watching you take on this role and position, and I was very excited. Even though I was sad when Steve Franks decided to retire, I was relieved that you were stepping up to accept that position. Well, I should say your nomination. I don't know. I know there's a whole process behind it. You weren't just a shoo-in for it. You definitely interviewed and had a whole process around it. So
it's like 3 months. It was
pretty intense.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
So there's been a lot of talk around realtors.
Yep.
I don't know if anyone doesn't know that or not, but what are some of the other issues surrounding what's going on with the DOJ that we don't talk a lot about?
Well, yeah, I think that's a good question. So most of the talk recently has really been about the lawsuit, which, I mean, I don't want to say that the lawsuit has nothing to do with the Department of Justice, but it's really separate from what the Department of Justice is looking at. I think some of the issues that were brought up in the settlement or in the lawsuit and the settlement are the same, but I think the Department of Justice is still looking at the industry. We know that NAR met with the Department of Justice to go over the settlement. I can tell you that one of the things that the Department of Justice said was that they are watching and are very concerned about ways that realtors may be looking at getting around the settlement. And when we asked them to give a specific example, their answer was, well, we've just seen a lot of chatter out there on the internet. So on the one hand, it's a little bit like, okay, well, I don't know that the Department of Justice should worry about chatter on Facebook. But on the other hand, I know you and I have both seen posts. We've talked about this a little bit about, maybe if I say it's a 3-bedroom house, then that's going to mean.
And I highlight the word 3 or whatever.
Right. We gotta stop doing that. Right. We never should have done it in the first place. We got to stop doing it. Don't be too clever by half, because you're going to get everyone in trouble.
Exactly. And I actually am happy that is what you chose to talk about, because I think that a lot of times in leadership positions, we don't always want to talk about things that might feel not so good. If everybody thinks it's fun to be flippant about, certain things, you don't want to be the Debbie Downer. But this is important.
It is.
They are actually watching. They're in the private groups. They are watching and they're paying attention and they're using what they see as ways to shape how they believe our rules should be and how we should operate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And, they're not done with continuing to watch the industry
Right.
and moving forward on their track. And, I think the settlement maybe causes them to pause a little bit to see how it impacts buyers and sellers.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly it's not like, they're not saying, okay, our work here is done and they're
Right.
going to walk away from the industry.
Well, I think it's a good opportunity. You bring up buyers and sellers. If the DOJ is watching our behavior, the buyers and sellers are watching our behavior.
Great point.
And if we're already seen as an industry that is not always likable, then if we are not behaving as professionals that we're proclaiming to be, that becomes an issue even to the consumer. So I'm happy that you brought that up. But what are I know that with the revamp of our strategic plan at Washington Realtors, we have talked a lot about advocacy and that is the primary value added benefit of being a member of the Realtor Association. So what kind of advocacy work is being done right now to create more home ownership opportunities? What is Washington Realtors doing specifically?
Yeah. So obviously this is a question that that I love talking about, right? Because this is really kind of what I did. So right now the legislature is not in session. Frankly, we always kind of breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief when they're not in session.
That's when you go on vacation, right?
Correct. Yeah. And but we do have an election coming up here on the, and really I'm talking about, everybody is focused on the, presidential or, something else. I'm talking about the legislative elections, right? Which will really decide where the state moves on housing policy. So right now we are pretty active in elections. I think one of the things we're really proud of at Washington Realtors is we are literally the most bipartisan PAC in the state of Washington. Housing policy is bipartisan. It really is. And so we work with people who are willing to work with us. I think one of the things that we've seen in the past, I don't know, this might be considered a hot take. I don't think it's that much of a hot take anymore, is, local jurisdictions are really a big stumbling block on housing supply.
Absolutely.
And look I get it from their perspective, and I do think it's important to understand their perspective. People vote for city council members largely because they love the city they live in and they want the city to stay as it is, right?
Right.
And, I'm sure that every city council member, the second that bulldozer moves into a neighborhood, when they go to that Safeway, in that neighborhood, they have a line of 6 people saying, what's going on? What are you doing? What are you building here? So I understand the challenges that it presents to city council members to upzone and to add units and to do all of that stuff. And I sympathize with that. I also don't know that it matters. People are moving here. We have a responsibility to make sure they have a place to live. And ultimately, we need to come together to figure out a way forward. So we were very active on the Missing Middle bill, which was a bipartisan bill that passed the legislature with a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans voting yes for it, right? A great bill that says that in specific areas that are within the urban growth area and have some infrastructure around them, on single-family lots, you can build, up to a 4-plex, and then if there's some affordability in there, you can build up to a 6-plex. We're really excited about that. I think duplexes are a great first-time homebuyer product, and right, because of course they can live in one, and they can rent out the other side and have some rental income. which helps pay that mortgage. And we don't have enough duplexes in the state. I also, I think smaller landlords probably tend to be a little, do I want to say, I'll say better, right? Like, I mean, I think when you get away from the big corporate landlords that just plug in data into their computer and right, that's probably not the best renter experience to have. So I also think building more duplexes and triplexes, I think that's a good renter experience as well.
Well, even
or is more likely to be.
Fourplexes work as far as financing goes. You can do a VA, FHA with a fourplex as long as you're there. So I think talking about it across the board is very helpful. So when you mention the local townships or cities and the neighborhoods or homeowners who are saying, no, I don't want more development, I think people are forgetting at one time somebody didn't want their house in the neighborhood. Right. And so we have to definitely, like you said, we have a duty to make sure that there's housing available, whether it's to buy or rent. So
there was a great line in the now shuttered Seattle PI where, and I forget the columnist who wrote this, but I quote it all the time. People define sprawl as any home that is newer than theirs. Right. And so
forgetting
that at one time, right, where their house is, it was a field, right? Where a deer ate grass,
Look at Spanaway. You go out to Spanaway. When I was in high school, there were horse farms everywhere.
Right.
There's no horses. I don't know where all the horses went, but there's a lot of housing.
Yeah.
For our biggest employer in the state.
Where'd you go to high school?
Foss.
Okay, you went to Foss.
But I was just driving out there.
Right.
We don't need to get into my juvenile years.
No, that's fine.
Foss,
that's fine.
I had a family member in Spanaway, and I had friends in Spanaway, so I did go out there.
Got it. I'm a Curtis kid.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to Curtis High School, University Place. So,
yes.
So same thing, right? You
right.
drive around University Place.
Totally changed.
It's completely different from when I was in high school.
I feel like the only rural-looking part of University Place is the apple orchard.
Yeah, right?
Yes. Yeah. And this is Jasmine Jefferson with the Around the Block podcast with TapCar. And we wanted to take a moment to let you know there are sponsorship opportunities available. We would like to keep this podcast going and also highlight our members who'd like to support us. So if you are interested in what that looks like, please reach out to info@tapcar.org. So speaking of local the work that you're doing in the legislature at the state level, what is Pierce County's role in real estate world with regards to Washington Realtors and the state legislature?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, the Tacoma-Pierce County Association of Realtors, I think, has done a really good job taking advantage of the resources that are out there with both Washington Realtors and the National Association of Realtors. So and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the campaign, but for the Tacoma Housing Project.
Home in Tacoma. Phase 2,
right.
Another iteration of Phase 2 was just released. An email came out. So if you're listening to this and it's fairly new, please go back to your emails, Google Home in Tacoma, and take a look at what they're asking for feedback on Phase 2.
But it was great. Tacoma used resources from NAR. I mean, and by resources, I mean money,
correct.
Right?
Yes.
Let's be really honest about what it was. And from Washington Realtors to give the council cover to increase the amount of housing in Tacoma. And, in their discussions with the council members, they knew that that's where the council wanted to go. Sometimes your job as an advocacy organization, sometimes it's to change the mind of electeds on whatever level. But in this case, it was to help them get to where they needed to go. By the way, those are the most fun campaigns to run, right? The changing the minds can always be a little challenging sometimes. And so continuing to do that and look for other jurisdictions that are open to that, I think that's really important. The fact that we have really good communication and a good relationship with the local association, we want to support you guys and your efforts to increase housing in Pierce County.
We need it.
Right. And I'll just be honest, right? There's a little I grew up in Pierce County. And so there is a part of me that is like, yeah, I mean, come on. I
don't think I realized that you're a Pierce County kid. I don't know where I thought you lived. I don't think I thought you were from Washington.
Listen, the less people think about my high school years, probably the better.
Same.
So anyway, I love all of our local associations, but Pierce County.
But we're in Pierce. We're on a Tap Car podcast right now.
That's right.
You can give us all the love that you want. Good. I do want to talk about the dollars that Tap Car got from Washington Realtors to support that campaign, because a lot of times we are asked to support different initiatives and campaigns. And in this one, what we saw as a board and a government affairs committee was there were a lot of voices not being heard in favor of development and filling some of the gaps with the missing middle. And so that's how we decided to even ask you guys, hey, is there any funding that we can secure to help be a voice for other people in this argument? Because it felt like everybody who was showing up to the meetings was saying, no, not in my backyard. And the people who were like, actually, I would love to own a house. They're at work, or, they can't make it, or for whatever reason, or maybe they were nervous. They didn't want the pushback and they didn't want to be in a fighting match. They just wanted to see more housing. So I thought that was really interesting to watch with such a big initiative in our city here in Tacoma that other cities across the nation are paying attention to.
Yeah.
So that was really great. So as far as membership, I know with the settlement and our Tap Car members are part of the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, which is not realtor owned. We'll talk about that in a different episode. But with the settlement, and what are some of and we talked about advocacy being a value proposition.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that are not talked about that have come up that membership is saying, these are the things that make it worthwhile to be a realtor?
Well, I would say this. I think the fact that we were really leaders in nationally on requiring buyer agency agreements, right? And that was something that that we had been talking about at Washington Realtors with legislative steering. You serve on legislative steering committee, and we'd been talking about that for about 2 years. We were kind of thinking about the timeline of when to bring that to the legislature, and we had a big presidential advisory group that Sherry Daniels was then president from Yakima, and she put together a presidential advisory group to look at a pretty controversial issue at the time. And it's funny to look back at it now, but I would just say, can you imagine what the last couple of months with the settlement would be like if at the same time you're getting all of this news, you're getting all of these, absurd New York Times articles about the industry, and all of this, and you have to make this pretty big change to your business practices.
Right.
I mean, I know that the last couple of months haven't been awesome, but, I think if we hadn't have made that change last year, and we've now been talking about it for a year, think about how overwhelming it could have been.
Well, it's overwhelming for everyone else.
Yeah.
We've gone through that point of figuring out what does that look like, and still, working through it. And Washington Realtors is doing a good job of not only, I want to say, staying in their lane, because you can't tell us how to run our businesses, but providing the clarity that we need as best as possible, because in real estate, everything's not always as black and white until there's a lawsuit where we're forced to be more black and white. So
that's right.
But
and then I would also, of course, the legal hotline, right? Annie Fitzsimmons. I mean, I think that is a benefit that we see when we survey the members
every time.
Right, every time. And Annie is fantastic. It's really interesting because in my new job, I work with Annie a ton, and I worked with her a little bit because she does help on advocacy, and she comes in and she's testified before on a couple of different issues, but I didn't work with her a ton, and that's been one of the real fun pieces of this new job is working really closely with Annie. And so I called her just the other day, and she answered the phone, and she was like, I haven't talked to you in like 2 weeks. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's because it's been a really good 2 weeks, Annie. And so that's been a fun part of the job. So Annie's fantastic. I think one other thing I would give a shout out to is our tech helpline. And, I know some offices, there are some models out there where they provide IT support, but there are some models out there where there's not a lot of IT support. And the tech helpline, I think, is a really underused tool for members.
Agreed.
And by the way,
tell me why though. Why is it underused? What's the misconception?
I maybe that it's difficult, right? Maybe it's like because everybody has had that experience of calling up, whatever helpline and sitting there and waiting on hold, and your call will be up in 26 minutes, right?
Oh my Lord!
And so we've all experienced that. Maybe that's one of the thoughts. Maybe people don't think about it in the moment they need it.
Right.
Right. They're kind of aware of it generally, but then, their computer blows up and they don't really think about it. So and we've all had
We've
that
all
experience,
been there.
right? Can I tell a quick story, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so this was a Hill Day, this was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Hill Day when you're the government affairs director, right? My joke that I would always make at Hill Day is my second favorite day of the year because the day after Hill Day is my favorite day of the year because I don't have to think about it, right, for a long time. So, you get up super early. There hasn't been much sleep that week anyways because members are down and you're doing the whole, conference thing, right? You've been through that ringer.
Absolutely.
And so it's super early. I'm like getting in my car, I'm putting my bag down and I drive to work and I get my bag out and I can't find my laptop, right? It's Hill Day. I need my laptop. And I'm like, what did I do with my laptop? Oh, yeah.
You left it on the top of your
car? I put it on the top of my car.
Oh, my gosh.
And so at like 6 a.m., I'm driving the streets of Olympia
tell me it's
back to my house.
Still on your car. It wasn't?
No, never found it.
Oh, my God.
Never found it. Anyways, so I wish that the tech helpline could have helped me there. I'm not sure
I don't know if they could.
I don't know that would have been a resource there. But so use the tech helpline. It's easy to use. It's free to members, and I've talked to people about whether it's they were setting up a server in their office,
right,
or for whatever reason they can't connect to the copy machine, whatever it is. I had a realtor tell me they set up their smart TV at home, like their personal one.
Yes.
And they felt kind of bad. They were telling me the story. They were like, I felt bad. And I told the person, this isn't really business. This is just my TV that I want to watch the football game on. And the person was like, well, you're a realtor, so
it's
let's
not
go,
limited,
right? It's not,
right.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you brought that up because I think the misconception is that if you're with let's say a large firm and they have their in-house IT and then they also have their corporate IT and then they may also have another helpline for something else. So 3 layers, but nobody can talk to you about Dropbox.
Yeah, right.
And how to get it to sync.
Yeah.
Or how do you get another email uploaded to your Outlook? Because they're meant for bigger types of issues.
Yeah.
And so for me, we actually have, and I'm with a bigger firm that has those different levels, we have the tech hotline on a large sheet of paper next to the copy machine so that everybody's aware of it and it's part of our onboarding process because your cell phone now as a new broker, you're using your cell phone in a different capacity. And all of the other IT is set up so that your computer or you have access to the website and all of those things. So, yes, I agree that definitely is one of the top things. So, as we wrap up, and I'm having a really good time.
Yeah, this is great. This is flown by.
It would be so awesome if we did like hour-long sessions. But what I think in closing, I'd like to know, and I hope everybody else would like to know, what do you see as the future for the industry as it evolves from this NAR lawsuit?
So I think that talking about brokers' value to the consumer, it's always been important. It is so much more.
And when you say the broker, interchangeably we use agent and broker. So we're talking about the on the ground agent, broker working in the marketplace. Broker is what we are licensed as.
Yeah.
We still call ourselves agents, but that's who you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So, right. So, and not just generally, but seller.
Mm-hmm.
Here is what I provide for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think a lot of, and conversely, buyer, right?
Correct.
This is what I provide for you. And I think a lot of times when we talk about the settlement, we're talking about, you know, how much is the commission? Where is it coming from? All of that, because that's really the required part. But it's such an opportunity. And why wouldn't you say, you know, hey, we're going to talk about, you know, the commission and where it comes from and all of that. But before we do that, let's talk about the reasons that commission exists, right? Here are all of the things that I do, right? And, you know, my wife and I, we've bought and sold homes, and I have.
What do you mean you've bought and sold homes? You didn't use me as your agent.
I did not, but it's not your
I'm
market,
just kidding,
right? So, and I'll tell you what, our realtor was, this doesn't surprise you, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Saturday night calls. The best part was we went to an open house. We kind of fell in love with a home. And we went to the open house and we walked through it, and we knew, right? We were like, we're making an offer on this, right? And the listing agent was at the open house. Mm-hmm. And so our realtor was like, okay, are we ready to leave? Do you want to see anything else? And we were like, nope. She's like, all right, huddle up right here,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to walk down the stairs, poker face. We're not excited about this house, right? Help me help you, right? So anyways, I just say that to illustrate, and it's something that I think